bringing you the best strategies to navigate your financial life. It's time to follow your compass. Listen to our industry-leading guests and grab some tips on how to navigate your financial world and beyond. Live from Gateway Financial Partners Studios, we bring you Navigating Your Wealth Journey with your host, Mike Torello.
Welcome to another episode of Navigating Your Wealth Journey. Today, we're going to talk all things cybersecurity. Our guest today is Christian Cooper, who is a network engineer over at Poche University. And he's going to take us through some of the pitfalls people run into, some real important things to keep a focus on when you're focusing on your cyber life as the world gets more and more digital by the day. So, Christian, thanks for coming on today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I want to let's dive right in, right? Let's go into some of these important topics. The three things we're going to talk about are mainly password security, dealing with public Wi-Fi networks, and a lot of scams, right? We know there's a lot of scams out there and some tips people can use to avoid them. So let's go right into password security. When we're talking about password security, why is it so important for people to understand how to keep those passwords secure and everything like that?
I think that it's really important because of how easy it is to implement. And I think when you hear the term, I guess, the cyber awareness or cybersecurity, it's almost an intimidating word. And a lot of people think that's a little bit over my head. I don't really know the advanced side of cybersecurity. And you don't really have to. You just have to have, I guess, the awareness to create as many layers as you can when it comes to protecting your accounts, your data, things of that nature. So passwords are a very easy thing to kind of think about when it comes to creating an account. It's really easy to get a hold of someone's password. I hate to say it, but that's the reality that we live in. And making a complex password is very important and a bare minimum. It's very easy to crack, so to speak, an easy password that doesn't have something like a capital letter in it, a special character, a number. These are things that maybe your IT department has said to you in the past and you're kind of rolling your eyes like, why does it matter, right? But it's there to protect you because the more complex a password is, the harder it is to get into an account.
So let's talk a little bit about the complexity of passwords for a second, because, let's say 10 years ago, everyone said, when they were creating a password, it was about don't make things that are personal to you. Don't use your last name, don't use the street you live on, things like that. But now people that are trying to hack into your accounts are mainly using computer systems and algorithms to hack in, and that complexity makes it harder to guess the password. So when you talk about the complexity, you mentioned capital letters, you mentioned special characters. What else should people be doing? Is there anything they should be avoiding while they're creating that password?
Yes. Length of password matters. The longer, the better. Special characters matter. You don't want to use personal things that I guess somebody would guess. There are password managers you can use. There are complex ones that you could buy. LastPass is one of them. But there are free, tools that are available for people to use. And I would also say, and a lot of people, including myself, are guilty of this sometimes, repeat passwords.
Okay.
How many of your accounts do you use that use the same password? Just because it's complex doesn't necessarily mean it's foolproof, right? You can have a bunch of accounts and they all use the same password.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that's so important, because if your password gets hacked, right? If your account gets hacked and you have a repeat password, the first thing those hackers are going to reuse is they're going to try that password again on every single account that's a known account for you to test, are you using the same password over and over again?
Yeah. A lot of times it's more so they're looking for vulnerable accounts, right? If your data is all over the internet and I get a hold of it, how vulnerable is it, right? So things like, is it a complex password? If I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is a weak password, and I try it and I get in and I see things that like MFA is not enabled. There's nothing that ties it back to you in any way, right? Like you're not getting a code back to your phone. There's no Face ID. There's no authentication. There's no verification. I'm going to go, this person is not aware of their accounts and their data. So I'm going to try it in multiple places. They probably don't even know when people are signing in and signing out of their accounts. A lot of people, I think, take the assumption that I make an account on a random company and that the company just manages it at that point. And that's not really entirely true. Yeah, they're managing their company as a whole for the cyber side of it, but you're responsible for your account and your information that's out there.
And that's so important to remember is it's your account and you are responsible for it. So those complexities, the length of passwords, you're not the first person I've heard say, make it longer. And it basically becomes a math equation, right? You add an extra digit or an extra character at the end, and it's just another layer of multiple permutations of possible passwords that makes it harder to crack the code.
Right.
You mentioned MFA. Let's talk about MFA for a second. First, kind of explain to people what is MFA and how important is it? We're seeing it be required a lot more places, but it's still an option. And for some people, it's a pain in the neck option. But why is it so important? Why should you have it turned on?
It's very important because if you're dealing with someone that can easily crack a password, right? In this day and age, there are some advanced tactics that you can use. In some cases, I don't have to guess your password. I have a code that's going to run that's just going to sift through a bunch of common passwords, and I'm going to get in eventually, right? And that, again, this is an advanced tactic. So multi-factor comes in because it's, again, it's an authentication method that makes it very hard for a hacker to impersonate, right?
Okay.
If I'm a hacker, I don't have things that are your phone number, right? A code that goes to your phone number. That's hard for me to impersonate. Or something like a Face ID or something that you have to go in and verify yourself with. So again, it's another layer that you are putting onto your account. And nothing, I hate to say it, nothing is necessarily foolproof, but it's another layer that most hackers don't want to deal with, right? Because the more layers that you have, so to speak, the more or the less invested they want to be in the information that's out there. They're targeting vulnerable accounts.
Exactly.
Right? So the more layers that you have, they get down the line, they're like, okay, this person's on top of it. The layers are there to kind of slow down anyone that's trying to get information out. And they're probably not going to go after someone with a vast array of layers to their account. They're probably going to give up and go, all right, that's well guarded.
It makes a lot of sense, right? You think about someone, you think about these hackers that are trying to get into your accounts, right? They're trying to get your personal information. They're going to go after the easier targets that they can get into multiple layers of accounts who get a full profile of information, right? The person that they run into these slowdowns that's well protected, they're probably just going to move on. It doesn't mean they're not going to try, but they're probably going to move on because it's that much more difficult and it's going to take them that much longer to get through to your account.
You can never prevent the attempt.
Right.
But you can do so many things to slow down the attempt and catch them in the act. Right. And most of the time they don't want to deal with that. They're looking for vulnerable targets that haven't really implemented many layers at all. And it's easy for them to get in and that don't leave traces of them getting in too. Especially these layers also provide traces back to them too.
Right. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. When we're talking about multi-factor, is there a level of which multi-factor you should use, right? Like, is a code to your email as secure as a code to your phone? Or if you use a, authenticator app versus using, the text codes, how would you kind of rank the most important or the most safe multi-factor options?
Well, when we're talking about, I guess, like in a work environment, the Authenticator app, I would say, is probably the most secure because you have to get into the Authenticator app and verify yourself by doing that first.
Got it.
Right? So there's already one layer of verification. You just have to get into the app. Then you have to verify the request of you getting into the account that you're trying to get into the first place. So I would say the Authenticator app because you can also, generate, if that doesn't work for you, if you're locked out of your Authenticator app, I would say text message is probably second.
Okay.
You know, getting a hold of somebody's phone number and getting their text messages, that's very hard
Right.
to do. And then I would probably say email last. Not that it's not secure, but it's probably the least secure when you put up those three.
Yeah, right. Because the email at the end of the day, that's completely web-based, right? Someone could grab the email the same way they're trying to grab the account that they're trying to get into.
Correct.
Awesome. And then you mentioned password managers, right? If we're going to be making these long, complex, unique passwords for everything, it's hard to remember. How should somebody manage their passwords?
There are multiple tools, and I would say that it really depends on what kind of accounts that we're talking with, right? How valuable are these accounts? Like, if we're just talking about like your social media accounts, you don't really need a password manager, like a paid password manager for that, right? If you're, you know, a financial advisor and, you know, there's confidential information that you're dealing with, and maybe you really need to tie those down and have super secure passwords, and you're thinking, how am I going to remember that on a regular basis? What these password managers do, like LastPass, is that they securely store your passwords and they autofill to when you are in your login screen, so you don't have to remember them.
Got it.
You can update them from within. It's almost like an authenticator app that stores your password, so to speak.
Okay.
So there are other password managers out there. LastPass is one that I'm most familiar with. And it also will take all of your accounts, rank up, you know, the complexity of your password, like how complex is it and how much it's repeated.
Got it.
Right. And it'll give you like a total score of like, this is how well your accounts are doing. And
Right.
it's, you know, it could be a little tedious to kind of update that and manage it. But, and I'll say this with all layers of cybersecurity, the time invested in securing all of your accounts is far less than the time that it will take on your investment on trying to get everything that you lost back.
Okay. That's a huge point, right? It's put the time in on the front end, secure your data so you don't have to retrieve it should you lose it later on.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Great. Let's move on a little bit off password security. Let's talk about public Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi has become something everybody needs, right? You want it in your pocket. You're walking around with a computer every day, and everywhere you go, whether it's a coffee house or a business, everybody has kind of a publicly accessible Wi-Fi. You know, you go to a stadium, stadiums have publicly accessible Wi-Fi to be able to use now. And how should we be using it? Should we be using it at all to begin with?
Yeah, you could use public Wi-Fi. I would just say kind of be a little bit cautious when connecting. If you go to like a local coffee shop, right, sometimes they'll have like a public Wi-Fi available. And I would say the key thing is take your time when connecting to public networks. First thing, do they even have public Wi-Fi? It's pretty easy to walk into a coffee shop and impersonate Wi-Fi.
Got it.
Someone can go and sit in and set up their own source speed network. They could also have their own Wi-Fi, and someone can walk in and create their own network that's just broadcasting a stronger frequency. So I think it's very important to make sure that the network that you're connecting to actually is a real one that whoever's using, and then you're also trusting that source that you're connecting to, right? So I would say browse cautiously.
So a couple things with that, right? To make sure you're connecting to the right Wi-Fi. The name of the network obviously matters, right? We're going to be looking, those are standard things you're going to be looking through cybersecurity, right? So you're looking for spelling errors on the name of the network. You're going to be looking for, you know, is it advertised in the business that you're in, that it's a actual network that's there. And then when you go to connect, most of these businesses will have some type of terms and conditions you have to accept. That's almost like a good thing when you see that sometimes when you see it pop up, because you know the network is at least being offered by the business.
Right. Yeah, no, it takes 2 seconds to verify, right? Hey, is this your Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
I would say the scarier ones are the ones that just don't have a password and you could just get right in. You don't know how it's being managed. You don't know who's listening in on traffic. Now, those days of kind of, I don't want to scare anyone from connecting to public Wi-Fi, right? There are a lot of security protocols in place to keep you safe, right? HTTP is the unsecure version of HTTPS, right? The S is secure, right? So that's the encryption of the traffic that you're using when you kind of surf the web, right? So I don't want to make it sound like public Wi-Fi is super dangerous. Don't connect to it, right? I would lean on your cell provider, for just any time that you need to use it in a public space, and if you can't, that's when I would lean on public Wi-Fi, so to speak. And I would also just, if you are connecting, I would be very cautious of where you're going.
Got it.
If you're dealing with, I guess so to speak, an advanced sort of person that's really listening in on the traffic, they're really just listening to where you're going.
Okay. That makes sense. So you're saying, like, if I'm going to connect to, the Wi-Fi in a Starbucks and I'm going to go on my social media, probably not that big of a deal.
Yeah, not really.
But I want to avoid secure sites.
Are you logging into your bank? Are you checking your bank account information? Are you going and checking your medical records, right? Things of importance to you. You want to kind of, be on the side of caution.
Okay, awesome. You mentioned kind of that digital footprint that you leave. Talk a little bit about, kind of explain to people everywhere they go, every time they're using the internet, what does that digital footprint look like, and how accessible does that become after they've moved on?
It varies based on where you're going and who you're providing the information to.
Okay.
We live in I guess a world where data is everywhere, and there are companies out there that are using it for good, and there are people that are buying it for bad. It's everywhere, and people are constantly buying and selling other people's data in a legal sense and an illegal sense too.
Right.
And a lot of the illegal side of it is, people's usernames and passwords and socials, right? That's the bad side of it. A lot of that is disclosed in the terms and conditions and privacy statements that you immediately click through when you create your account and go, yeah, I read all that.
Yep.
Right. So that's how the company handles your data.
Okay.
Right. Whether that, how they store it, whether or not they can necessarily sell it to somebody else. And then there's kind of your end of it. That's just, and that's more so, I guess, a lack of protection that you have over yourself that is kind of getting out there. That's like things like your name, your email, your telephone. Like there's a public record.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, there's multiple kind of areas of data leakage, so to speak, of how you can kind of get your information out there.
Yeah, awesome. And then it's really, you mentioned like where you're going. And that's just something that's so important, whether you're on, secure private internet or you're just, you're on public Wi-Fi, the actual sites that you're going to, the apps that you're using, and the data that you're sharing through those sources. Because like you said, every site is gathering information and then sharing it externally.
Yep.
So I think that's just such an important point for people to remember. It's not so much where you're using the information, but actually what you're doing and where you're going and
who you're trusting with it.
Who you're trusting and just being conscious of some of these websites are not secure. They're not the greatest places to be trusting all of your information to, right? Should you be making an account with this place, right? Should you be allowing them onto your home network, if you're at home and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Moving on to some scams. So let's talk a little bit about what are some scams that people should be looking for. What are some terms people may have heard that are important that they need to know, things like that. So let's kind of start at the beginning. What's kind of the most common scams? Like what's going to happen to people? How can they be vulnerable?
I would say the most common that people probably see are phishing attempts.
Okay.
Right? And a lot of those are the weird emails that you get and you go, that's spam.
Right.
Some of them are more sophisticated than others.
Okay.
The phishing in the sense is more so they're not necessarily targeting you, Mike Torello, and only Mike Torello. They're kind of just casting a net.
Okay.
Right? And there's the bait in the email, and they're like, who bites? Right? So a lot of it is just like they don't care if you necessarily respond. They just want to see who responds and who's taking action on the email. Some of them are really well designed, and others aren't, and immediately hit your spam folder.
Right.
It's very easy to spot most of them. I think you really have to break down who's sending me this message. Take a look at the email. Like if you were to reply to it, what are they asking me to do? Is there any grammatical errors in this? Is there a link? If you're still not sure, hover over the link. Where is that link going? A lot of times it'll display the URL that, they want you to take an action, so to speak, right? They can't really infiltrate until you do take that action. And that's usually by clicking the link.
That was one of the things I was going to ask was, so you get an email, maybe you see the preview on your phone.
Yep.
You're not really sure. It might be a scam. It might not. Opening the email is okay. It's the action after you open the email that kind of triggers the beginning of the scam.
You're talking about like a really advanced opening. Like that's super advanced. And I don't think that really hardly anybody would see that type. It's usually safe to open. Right?
Got it. Okay.
And if you're ever unsure, and you're, I guess more so in the work side of things, like you get a work email and you're like, I don't really know what this is, who this is, forward it to your IT department.
Got it.
Right?
Right.
Always be on the side of caution. They would so much rather review the same email over and over and over again. Yep, that's safe, Mike, you're good. Right?
Yeah.
Rather than
you infiltrated the whole company because you opened and clicked on links.
That's their job.
Right.
Right? You know? So, and there are really good bad actors in this, so to speak. Like if they get into using compromised credentials, sometimes it could be from a coworker.
Yeah.
Right? And it could be really well disguised. And you're like, oh, well, Jim sent it to me. Like, it must be good. Not always the case.
Right.
Look at what the email is asking you to do. What is it asking you to click on?
Yeah, and I think a couple things you mentioned are so easy to do, and things that, I try to do, or I try to teach my parents to do and stuff like that, like hovering over the URL. Right? Like if the URL says it's going to a regular website and then you hover over it and it doesn't line up, obviously don't click it, right? Hover over the sender. The name can be changed very easily.
Yep.
Where did the actual email come from, right? And then I think one of the biggest things is were you expecting that request?
Absolutely.
Right. Like one of the biggest phishing scams that we get like on our work emails is request to sign documents. Well, if it's from somebody I'm not expecting, or if it's a document I'm not expecting, well, I'm definitely not going to sign it, but I'm also not going to click that link, right? Like I've been trained to know not to do that, but that's where document requests are becoming more frequent and people just click those. So you have to understand, like, were you actually expecting to sign a document or to click a link or have this sender send something to you? And if not, like you said, it doesn't hurt to ask. Right.
No, and there's a lot of money that kind of goes into keeping organizations safe, right? There's pen testing that goes on where they purposely send out it's safe because it's managed by the IT department.
Right.
It's supposed to be a harmful email to see who bites.
Yeah.
And you would be surprised on how many people bite just because it came from your coworker.
Yeah.
And they trusted it because, oh no, it came it came from Jim. It's like, no, what did Jim ask you to do, right? What was that link that you clicked on? And most people just don't take the time to digest it, and they're just so quick. We're always in a rush nowadays. It's take the few extra seconds to really look into the email and what it's asking you to do.
It's so important, and it kind of fits with the theme. And I was just thinking, when we're thinking of all these tips, right? Going back from password security through kind of using Wi-Fi and these scams, everything comes down to just slow down, right? Slow down, take an extra second, make sure you're making your password long enough. Make sure you're reading the terms and conditions. Make sure you're reading the emails that are sent to you to avoid the scam, because you're more susceptible to these things the faster that you go, and the more likely you are to miss something that you should have caught. Awesome. All right, as we're wrapping up today, anything else, anything you really think we should share with people for important cyber tips to really keep themselves secure, keep their account secure, and not fall susceptible to these scams?
Yes, you can do it. It's not rocket science. Take the time, look at your important accounts as a whole. Take a zoom out a little bit, right? What are the accounts that I really want to lock down? There are some really easy things that you can do to better secure your accounts. Enable MFA. If you haven't by now, you really should. Have that code sent to your phone, Face ID, anything that you can do to add that secondary layer. Make sure all of your passwords are long enough, complex enough, and that it's not the same password across the board. Those are very easy things. Another one that I think not many people take the time to, or maybe not even know. If I were to tell you why the purpose of tap to pay was invented, you'd probably say, what, convenience? It's just very quick.
Right.
It's more secure than inserting your chip or swiping your card on a terminal, because the terminal is what stores your credit card number.
Okay.
Right? And the terminal stores it and is like, yep, that's a valid credit card number. Got it. Process completed. When you tap to pay, it's generating a encrypted token that processes the transaction. It's more secure, so to speak, right? It's not storing your credit card number.
Right.
It's using that secure token.
So
and it's faster.
For a layman to kind of understand that, it's basically like using a new credit card number every single time that you pay.
Kind of.
For the tap, as opposed to the number that's written on the card.
It stores your credit card number in a different way. It's not storing your credit card. It's converting it to. I mean, there's different types of encryption. I don't want to. But it stores it in a way that's not able. It's very hard to decipher.
Okay.
Right. So it'll take, like, if we were going to use password encryption for an example, and you're creating an account, and your password is apples.
Yep.
It's not storing the password apples. It's going to convert apples into a random string that's meaningless to any. Like, it's not. It can't be.
Understood.
Right, and it uses apples as the key to unlock. So that's kind of like a basis of encryption.
Now, just with tap to pay, is there any difference between tapping your credit card versus using Apple Pay or Google
No,
Pay?
they're pretty much the same.
Pretty much
They're
same.
using
Okay.
that encrypted, one-time, never reused token to process the payment.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This wraps up another episode of Navigating Your Wealth Journey. Make sure to follow us on YouTube and get the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Have a good day.